going to start with opening statements here. We've just drew for the order that they will be going in about 5 minutes ago. So first up is actually Ken Finlayson of the People's Party of Canada.
Good evening. I'm honored to address you tonight as the candidate for the fastest growing party in Canadian political history, and there's a good reason for that. Part of it is because we put Canadians and Canada first. We don't engage in special interest groups, lobby groups, UN globalists, and certainly not the big multinational corporations. Furthermore, we tell it like it is. We're not obsessed with political correctness or the vacuous virtue signaling that seems to have become the hallmark of politics in this modern day. Freedom, fairness, responsibility, and respect. These are the four fundamental principles that are the basis for every policy that we put forth. We are the party of small government because we have more faith in you than we do in big government. That's why we believe in free market principles that have produced the highest standard of living in the history of the developed nations of the free world. To that end, we will eliminate corporate welfare and supply management because they are a corruption of those same fundamental free market principles. We absolutely will build pipelines so we as Canadians can benefit from the vast wealth that is ours. Revenue that will allow us to take care of Canadians first, from our seniors to our veterans to our healthcare system. We believe charity begins at home. We believe in science, not celebrities, not politicians, that confirms for us that man-made carbon dioxide is not responsible for climate change. Therefore, there is no need for a repressive, useless carbon tax. We will change the way we do politics in this country because we think Canada is worth saving. We believe in the equality of all citizens.
Great, thank you, Ken. Next up, we have Ian Curry of the Green Party.
I'm Ian Curry, Green Party candidate. I was born and raised in Kamloops. I moved back here 20 years ago to raise a family and to work as a Crown prosecutor. Do you believe that climate change is a threat to our children's future? If your answer is yes, I urge you to reject the false narrative that this election is about which of the major party leaders you find less distasteful. I urge you to reject the ping-pong politics of bouncing back and forth between your distrust of the Liberals and our fear of the Conservatives. They are telling you that you have no choice, that this is as good as it gets. Well, that isn't good enough, because this time, our children's future is on the line. We are the only party who are telling you the truth about the climate crisis. It would be nice if we could slow dance our way out of this problem. It would be nice if a magical technology would appear and provide the fix. But the science, the best science available, tells us that we need to cut emissions drastically by 2030. And Canada hasn't started yet. Our emissions have increased over the last decade. We can't wait for the Liberal Party to figure out whether the political winds are blowing strong enough such that they can make a commitment to science-based targets. We can't allow the Conservatives to take us back to the era of Stephen Harper, when we made Canada the first country to withdraw from the first climate change treaty. Change is difficult, but climate change is happening. There are consequences to our vote. Vote Green.
And now we go to Cynthia Egley of the NDP.
Hello and bonjour. I'd like to recognize that we are meeting here on the unceded territory of the Secwepemc Nation Society. My name is Cynthia Egley, and I work as a family justice counselor and family mediator for the Ministry of Attorney General. I'm also a part owner in a small business, a union activist, wife, friend, and mom of 2 daughters, 22 and 18. I believe in Jagmeet Singh, the federal NDP, and their new deal for people. In fact, Jagmeet Singh called me himself and encouraged me to apply. And his exact words to me were, "I hear you have a Master's of Leadership degree and you're a trained mediator. You're exactly what we need." I explained that I have over 450 hours of conflict resolution courses and thousands of hours of mediating disputes. As an activist, I have a track record of speaking out for those who can't or for whatever reason won't. If this riding sends an MP to Ottawa from the Conservatives or the Liberals, we're going to get what we've always gotten: denial of the climate and housing crisis or delay of universal pharmacare. Taking better care of each other, conserving our environment, doing what's right, building an economy that works for more people, building stronger communities, and most importantly for me, reconciliation is the heart of what the NDP do. The NDP believes in the full recognition of the human rights of Indigenous people and that we all have a right to be treated equally. I'm not a seasoned politician, but I'm passionate and I'm determined, and this is day 15 on the campaign trail for me, so I feel I'm a quick learner. I'm here tonight to say that if you want a champion in your corner that has the courage to stand up and fight for people in this riding, vote for me.
Everybody's doing so well so far. Kathy McLeod with the Conservative Party of Canada.
So good evening, everyone, and thanks first of all to the audience for coming out, but also to Radio NL Kamloops This Week and the Chamber for hosting this very important forum in Kamloops. So this is a very important election, and what I thought tonight is that hopefully I'm going to have chances to express concerns in terms of what's happening with the direction of the current government, but not just oppose, but to propose. So certainly I'm hoping to say, okay, this is a problem, but I think we need to head in this direction, and our party believes we need to head in this direction. I'll quickly highlight 1 or 2 areas that are a concern. Not many people are worried about out-of-control spending by the government. I am worried about that. Our interest payments are $26 billion a year. We all know that if interest rates go up, we're going to be in real trouble. $26 billion could quickly turn into 36 to 38. What's that going to do to our healthcare transfers? What's that going to do to the programs that we want to do for housing and so many other things? In good times, you have to live within your means, and certainly I'm concerned that that hasn't been happening. You know, another area I think that is going to be a real challenge is we all continue to depend on oil. I would expect most people came here tonight in their cars. So yes, I think most parties up here, except for one, believe that we need to move towards less intense emissions, to move to a better future. We're not there yet. We can't continue to vilify our friends in Alberta who are just hardworking people who have an asset. I think we need to continue to support Canada, Canada's oil, and certainly look towards a positive future. Absolutely. Thank you.
Next up, we have Kira Cheeseborough of the Animal Protection Party.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Kira Cheeseborough, and I'm running with the Animal Protection Party of Canada. I'm standing up here as a representation of young people who understand the urgency of climate change, and I wish to influence the narrative regarding solutions that we can propose that will be sustainable and stable for us going forward. We want to use climate change as a lens to address all other issues because it is not an isolated issue that we can address through just banning harmful single-use plastics. We need comprehensive plans that are targeting every single interconnected industry and issue that affects Canadians. The future is at risk if this decisive action is not promptly taken. Not just my future or yours, but our children's and our grandchildren's future is at risk. So why did I choose the Animal Protection Party? Because it's the only party willing to address every single industry that is harmful and exploitative to humans, animals, and the environment, and who are contributing to climate change, such as animal agriculture. When we're looking at global greenhouse gas emissions, animal agriculture is responsible for 18% of global greenhouse gas emissions. 13% is from transportation. Beyond this, our platform seeks to address healthcare, job stability, the economy, affordability, implementing basic income programs, and looking at democratic reform. These are all interconnected, and we have to address it in a prompt manner, addressing climate change along the way. Thank you, everybody, for coming out tonight.
That was Kira Cheeseborough of the Animal Protection Party. Up next, we have Terry Lake of the Liberal Party of Canada.
Thank you, Brett, and ladies and gentlemen, good evening, and thank you for taking the time to come tonight. You could have stayed home in your warm homes, but you are interested in finding out all the positions of the individual candidates and parties, and for that we're really happy, and also grateful to Radio NL and to Kamloops This Week and the Chamber for putting this on. And I want to thank all the candidates, because it takes a lot to put your name forward. And I also want to say a special happy anniversary to Kathy and Gord, celebrating their 35th anniversary by coming in all candidates one. Many of you know me. I've been a city councillor, I've been your mayor, I've been an MLA for 8 years, serving as Minister of Environment, Minister of Health, and I retired from politics in 2017, went into the private sector for a couple of years. But why did I decide to come back into politics? Well, I firmly believe that Canada is on the right track. We have the lowest unemployment record in over 40 years. We have 900,000 people lifted out of poverty, including 300,000 children. We have a debt to GDP ratio which is the lowest in the G7, showing that we can invest in communities and in families in a fiscally responsible manner. We've made significant progress on climate change over the last 4 years. We're 75% towards our Paris targets. We need to do more, and we will do more. We have made really good progress on First Nations reconciliation. We need to do more, and we will do more. And of course, we've made some progress here in BC on the opioid overdose crisis, but I firmly believe we can do more from Ottawa, and that's one of the passions that I am committed to doing. We have a forestry downturn here that is mostly under the purview of the provincial government, but I firmly believe there are things the federal government can do to help. So for an experienced, effective, passionate voice in Ottawa, for you, vote for Terry Lake on October 21st.
Up next, we have Peter Carrick of the Communist Party of Canada.
Thanks. And thank you all for coming tonight. Our party wants to see the end of the illusion of democracy and the introduction of a real democracy. The end of electing our dictators. The ones who get to sit in Ottawa and with a wave of their hand distribute $4.5 billion to a corporation whose pipeline was not worth it. It was a move of rescuing that corporation. Where was the democratic opportunity for people who live along that corridor, that pipeline corridor, or people who are negatively impacted, or people in general? There wasn't even a debate in Parliament. Or how about proportional representation? Again, another promise we were given, another promise broken. The dictatorial powers of the Prime Minister, just like that. You don't get to choose. Well, you got to choose in 2015, in fact. We all chose to vote for parties that were committed to proportional representation. But with the wave of the hand, Mr. Trudeau takes that away from us. We want to democratize the workplace. How many workers in Vavenby got to choose whether or not that lumber mill closed down? No. The concentration of power in the hands of very few in our society. The Jenny Pattison Group, for example, which owns Canfor, had $3 billion in their net worth in 2009. In 2018, it was $10 billion. And this year, they closed that mill. Is that democratic? All those lives negatively impacted from the wave of a hand because it wasn't making enough billions for them? We need your support, though. The Communist Party needs your support. Thank you.
Okay, with that, with the opening statements over with, we will now take our first commercial break. When we come back, we will start taking your questions. So this will be your opportunity now to queue up at those points. More after this. We are now going to take questions from the audience, and maybe we'll start with the mic that's farthest away from you over there. Go ahead.
Good evening. My name is Catherine. I work for a company in Kamloops called Absorbent Products. In 2017, CFIA proposed regulations to amend Canada's Feeds Act. Many of the reforms were proposed, but two in particular that, if enacted, will jeopardize the viability of Absorbent Products, which is a 30-year-old company here in Kamloops. And we employ about 60 people. If CFIA's proposed regulatory changes are not based on robust science and overreach product export practices. If enacted, CFIA's proposed regulations would prevent APL from exporting its products to the U.S., its largest market, and I fear that APL may consider moving its operations to the U.S. So if elected, will you commit to fighting to scrap or at least amend CFIA's proposed changes to Canada's Feeds Act to help keep jobs here in Kamloops? And this question is for Terry or Kathy.
Terry or Kathy? Which one of you wants to go first?
I'd be happy to go first. The Canadian Food Inspection Agency has set itself up to try to create the highest regulations in the world, and that's to keep consumers safe. But in this particular case, they are layering their standards on the United States. So this is about naturally occurring dioxins that are used as part of an animal feed. And in the United States, Food and Drug Agency says there's no harm to humans. Once that trace amount goes through a sphere and ends up on your table, there is really no traceable amount that is a risk to human health. The CFIA has imposed this standard on exports to a country that doesn't have those standards. I think that's wrong. I think it's overreach by CFIA. I've spoken to people in the ministry, and I certainly would advocate to take that away. It's a nonsensical regulation as far as I'm concerned.
All right, thank you, Terry.
So this is an example. In the last 4 years, regulation on business and on Canadians has increased by about 4,500 regulations. We all agree that we need proper regulations for health and safety, but government tends to blossom. In the case of absorbent products, a number of us went to bat because it really, once we looked at the science, it did not make sense. I know the company's president did numerous trips, and no one would listen to him, in spite of Shadow Minister for Agriculture, Shadow Minister for Health, myself as a constituency rep. The ministers were non-responsive, they didn't listen, and quite frankly, they didn't seem to care. It is an overreach, and to stop an export of a product from Canada to the U.S., where it is deemed legal in the U.S., does not make sense.
Thank you, Kathy. With that, we'll go to the other side of the room here.
Hi, I'm Doc. This question is for Terry. If you want to respond, Cynthia and Peter, that would be great. My question is this: isn't deciding on extractive industry projects in advance and then consulting with First Nations post hoc after the fact, cynically drafting in band councils and using sophisticated legal fixers like Frankie Kabuchi, contrary to our Section 35 constitutional obligations to First Nations people, contrary to the honor of the Crown, contrary to the implementation of UNDRIP, and contrary to the spirit of reconciliation? Do you as candidates understand the gravity of how deleterious and toxic forcing through projects like these and treating consultation as an after-the-fact box-checking exercise is to the historical relationship between Canada and First Nations peoples?
Thanks for the question. It doesn't describe the process that the Crown follows, either on provincial or federal level. And as Environment Minister for 2 years, I know how deeply First Nations are consulted on these projects and accommodations are sought. The Conservative government changed the environmental assessment process when I was in office, and that caused all kinds of issues for First Nations, and it is why, in many cases, why the NEB had to be slowed down, because the court said that process didn't work, and so we had to do more consultation, which the Trudeau government said is absolutely appropriate, and we continue to do that as directed by the courts. We need to make sure First Nations are consulted, they're accommodated, and that they benefit economically and in all ways from these major energy projects that benefit all Canadians.
Short answer to your question is yes. And I'm going to add that true reconciliation, as a mediator, true reconciliation is not just consulting, but actually sitting down and having the hard conversations, which does take longer, but it means actually listening to what people have to say, not just saying, okay, I'm going to hear what you have to say, and now this is what's happening. It's actually about saying, where do we want to go, and how are we going to get there? Let's hear what you have to say.
Doc also added me to that, right?
Okay.
Yes, he did.
Yes,
Thanks.
okay.
So our party absolutely supports the implementation of all 94 recommendations of the Reconciliation Commission. And there's a big difference between consultation and approval. We say that if you're going to respect sovereign nations, you need to get their approval, not just consult with them. And that's a big part of Indigenous sovereignty, especially on unceded territory, that we should not have the dictatorial powers to walk all over the rights of Indigenous people or otherwise, or others. It's not okay for us to continue the same trend that we've been on the last 2 centuries of underfunding them, as the Liberal government has been found guilty of in the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal. And underfunding or walking all over them is just as violent.
Thank you, Peter. For the next question, we'll go that side.
Okay, there's a lot of concerns, including rail safety and fracking, but I'll narrow it down to 2. Okay, one is I want to ask about seniors and veterans. Will your party, and this goes for all of you, all I want is a yes or no on this.
Sir, can you just step just a little bit closer to the mic there?
Will your party show seniors and veterans the respect they deserve by increasing their pensions, yes or no? And the second is, unlike cities like Toronto and Montreal, families in Kamloops are being separated due to the lack of jobs in our city. What are you guys planning on doing, or your party planning on doing, to bring jobs, good jobs, to our city so we don't have to break families up?
Who would you like to direct that to? Sorry.
The top 3.
The top. Who's the top?
I can go
Possibly the top.
So the answer to your first question is yes. And the answer to your second question is the Green Party proposes to lead this community into to a new green economy. And so that means moving away from the boom bust cycle of extracting our resources, shipping them at low cost overseas, and then buying back the finished products. So we need to make investments in communities. We need to support local small business, local agriculture. We need to support the transition to a green economy by subsidizing and tax breaks for renewable energy sources, and we need to incentivize companies to begin the transition to to retrofitting buildings and houses all across the country.
Cynthia Oakland. Go ahead, Cynthia.
So in answer specifically to your question on the seniors, I don't have a yes or no answer. 600,000 seniors in Canada are living in poverty. That's shameful. The NDP's plan would, for expanding healthcare, would make it easier for seniors because they wouldn't have to pay for medications. And we also have a plan to build more than 500,000 affordable housing across Canada within 10 years, which would also help seniors. So I hope that's somewhat of an answer.
Kathy McLeod,
So in our campaign platform, we have both things for veterans and seniors, which will both be supportive and help make their life more affordable. In terms of communities and having to send their families away, I look at what's happening in some of our forestry communities right now, and it's quite devastating. We have made first of all, part of diversification, especially in our more rural areas, is you need to have good broadband, you need to have good cellular service. We certainly have made a commitment in that area. We've also made a commitment that right now we have a department called Western Diversification. It's got a minister that's sitting in Toronto. We made a commitment that we are going to have a minister for Western Diversification that's in the West, that's not handing out all the money to Victoria and Vancouver. And we're going to have a rural and a lens to every decision that we make as a government that puts that lens to our decisions.
Would your party raise the pensions? Would your party raise the pensions?
You're asking for two different veterans, and you're talking about seniors. There is escalators for the seniors' pensions, absolutely, and we've made a commitment to, there's a real problem with the veterans' pensions, and we've made commitments in that area.
Okay, to vote. You guys want to get? Okay, so you'll have to, if you want to do it, you have to use one of your challenges. Right now, though, Peter Carrick has thrown one of his challenge flags. So Peter Carrick of the Communist Party next.
So we think everybody should have an income worthy of a life with dignity. That includes pensioners and others. Every member of our society. And currently we have a tax system implemented and utilized, exploited by liberals and conservatives alike that allow a massive concentration of wealth to go to the top of the capitalist pyramid and the rest of us to suffer disproportionately. So we want to see a massive revamping of the tax system so that we have the funding we need for pensioners, people who are suffering through food insecurity, housing insecurity. I mean, the billionaires in Canada are clearly not doing the job, and the governments that respond to their needs are also not doing the job.
We're going to let all of the candidates answer that. We're going to give the challenge back to Peter, and Ken, you can hang on to yours if you want to. If you would like to speak to this now, go ahead.
Yeah, we put Canada and Canadians first. I think the last raise we got, I'm a senior, 54 cents. Wow. You know, so when the People's Party says they're going to put Canada and Canadians first, that means bringing some of this money home so that we can put it into programs like seniors, like healthcare. We believe charity begins at home. We got no business building roads in Africa when we got 600,000 seniors living in poverty.
Thank you, Ken. Chair Cheeseborough.
So to answer your first question, yes. The second question, bringing jobs here locally, if we're looking at the forestry industry, if we're stopping the exports of the raw lumber and we instead circulate it here and create high quality jobs where people can create those finished products to then export for a higher price, that's one way we can help keep families together. We also want to incentivize small businesses to move towards green initiatives and rewarding them with grants and subsidies to be able to help combat climate change. So these could be locally sourced foods or growing their own foods in a garden, and looking at community gardens as a great way to employ people locally who may not be able to hold a typical 9-to-5 job, and another way to address climate change and food insecurity.
Thank you. Okay, I think that's everybody. Terry, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I'd like to answer.
Get confused. All right, go ahead, Terry Lake.
On the question of seniors and veterans, well, we've already made significant improvements in both. The Conservatives closed 9 Veteran Affairs offices across Canada. Those have all been reopened. And there's been about $300 million put into Veterans Affairs and into Survivors Fund over the next 5 years. In terms of seniors, we've gone back to a 65-year eligibility for OAS. The Conservatives have raised it to 67. We are increasing OAS at 10% at age 75 and adding 25% increase to survivors on CPP if we are to be re-elected. In terms of jobs, we are a natural resource community still, connected very intimately to the high-tech sector as well, by the way. Most of our high-tech companies that have developed in Kamloops are related to the natural resource sector. Constructing the TMX pipeline as part of a comprehensive climate action plan will bring a lot of jobs to Kamloops.
Now you want to throw your challenge down. Okay, so Peter Carrick wants to throw his challenge down now.
This ought to be good.
Peter Carrick, Communist Party.
The most effective way to take money out of your community is to allow investors to extract it and put it somewhere else. And that's exactly what our tax system does. It takes the resources, the profit that we take here, like in Vavenby, another good example, profit being made by those workers up there. And as soon as it doesn't hit that 7% magic market in the capitalist system, it's closed. So we need to take the power out of those corporations and empower the workers, and they should have a right, as Jeremy Corbyn has proposed in Britain, the leader of the opposition party in Britain, that when a factory is about to close, the workers should be given the legal opportunity to take that factory over and run it as a cooperative worker-run work site. We support that here. Keep the jobs here in Kamloops. Keep them in the Cariboo-Thompson-Cariboo.
Thank you, Peter. Okay, now we're ready for the next question.
My name is Brian, and when I was in my profession, our motto was always the students first, the staff, parents were second, and and I was last. I have 2 questions for Mr. Lake. Mr. Lake, first of all, congratulations on being a veterinarian, a mayor, and health minister in BC. My question to you is, Kamloops is a regional center, and Kelowna has and Prince George are regional centers, and they do have a cancer clinic. But Kamloops does not have a cancer clinic, and we should have a cancer clinic now. You, sir, are presently a VP of a luxury marijuana business in Ottawa. It's not Kamloops. I would like to know what you propose to bring to Kamloops, what you're going to put on the table. Liberals right now presented Bill C-27. C-27 will affect middle-class Canadians, where it takes the defined pension plan and takes it to marginal.
We're going to need a question here soon.
All right, we're $200 billion in debt. All right, I'll get to my question. You permit Liberian tankers to come into Eastern Canada.
A question, please.
Okay. Your carbon tax is heavy.
Where's the question?
Pollution is 1.6% worldwide. The question is, I have 2 questions, if I may.
I think we're going to go with one here.
All right.
So, maybe count.
All right. Well, you people have that much time. Thought we would each have a moment. The Bank Act. The Bank Act right now is top-loaded in interest rates. Interest rates are taken at the beginning of a mortgage.
Okay.
Would you agree to look at changing that to spread it out for young folks?
Okay, and who's this for?
Terry Lake.
Terry Lake. You got the question in there?
I think so.
Okay.
I think I've got the question, but what have I brought to Kamloops? Not a cancer clinic, but a $500 million new hospital here in Kamloops. I think that's pretty significant, and I want to do more of that. In terms of the Bank Act and interest rates, we have the lowest interest rates that we've had for decades. Decades. When we bought our first home, the interest rate was 14.75%. Now you can get a home mortgage for about 5%. So I don't think government has to be on the levers like Donald Trump would like to be about interest rates. That's better left to people like the Bank of Canada who know what they're doing in terms of the economy and the effect it has on the economy. We're doing pretty well for interest rates, and we have the lowest unemployment rate in 40 years. We're on the right track.
Yes, so I just answered that.
Sorry, we're gonna have to move on here.
It's all on
We'll go to the other side over here now.
Okay, thanks. My name is Kyle Martin. My question is for all of you. If faced with a similar situation, such as Jody Wilson-Raybould and the ensuing scandal, when Trudeau ejected JWR and Phil Potham caucus, would you vote along party lines, like all Liberal MPs did, or would you vote morally and ethically to back them up, knowing that it is wrong for the PM to be corrupt, it is wrong for corporations to use corrupt politicians to evade or avoid the law, and it is wrong to remove two strong women simply because they inconvenience your leader and his goals?
Okay, who wants to take this first? Terry Lake, I suppose.
Yeah, thank you. As someone who's been a minister, sat around a cabinet table, been in a caucus, I can tell you that there is vociferous discussion that goes on in the caucus room or in the cabinet room. And you agree, once a decision is made, to go forward as a team. If you have disagreements, then you have those behind closed doors. And if you can't abide by what the team decides, then of course you make your way out. But this is a question of fighting for jobs all across Canada, and not just jobs, but for pensioners, for investors, and people that had nothing to do with any kind of action that occurred in 2006. There was no undue pressure on the Attorney General. She said that there was nothing illegal that occurred. And I tell you this, fighting for jobs is what a Prime Minister is supposed to do. It's what a Conservative Prime Minister would have done. There would have been no different whatsoever.
Thank you, Terry. So how we're going to do is we have questions for all. We're going to, after one person answers, then we'll start working our way left, and then to the next one we'll work our way right. So Kira Cheeseborough, if you've got an answer, you can go, or you can take a pass, your choice.
I think it's very important for us to address any corruption, and we need to be voting with, in these instances, with morals and upholding the dignity that people are relying when they are looking at a party. They are expecting a party to uphold people's dignity. So we should be voting to ensure that is being protected.
And Captain
It is absolute nonsense that this was about jobs. It is untrue. We asked if there was any assessment ever done in terms of deciding about the impact of jobs. There was none. I believe the CEO of the company indicated there was none. These are infrastructure projects that were going to be in Canada, and those people would have had opportunities, they would have had jobs. Minister Phil Pott, I was the shadow minister to Indigenous Services and other departments. She was a lady of great moral integrity. She was actually a minister. As much as I tried to look for criticism, I found less with her than other opportunities. So I would like to think, if things were that bad, that I would absolutely, there's discussions in caucus, absolutely you have discussions in caucus, you come out united, but there comes a time when you have to stand on your principles, and this is about undue pressure, found guilty by the Ethics Commissioner, and blocking RCMP from doing their job.
Okay, we'll go to Cynthia Igor next from the NDP.
I would vote with how I feel ethically and morally, and I would do what I felt was right, but I also have absolutely no doubt that Jagmeet Singh is in it for you and for people like us. He's not in it for the wealthy, and I feel that what likely happened is that someone made a decision based on money, not based on the right thing.
Let's encourage the Green Party.
So as a lawyer for 25 years and a prosecutor for 18, I would definitely vote to preserve the rule of law and prosecutorial independence. Thankfully, the Green Party does not whip votes and allows members to vote with their conscience and with their community. But this is not a difficult question. The Ethics Commissioner report makes clear what happened, and the rule of law is not something that can be bargained away, and that can be sacrificed. And prosecutorial independence is something that can be sacrificed for political expedience, which is what happened in the Next
up, Ken Finlayson of the People's Party of Canada.
Our system is clearly broken. We have way too much power concentrated in the PMO. The PMO censors, it doesn't matter whether it's liberal or conservative. We see this censorship of MPs done by the leaders. They operate like virtual dictators, doesn't matter whether it's conservative or liberal. Our party, like the Green Party, to their credit, does not have whipped votes. Our MPs will represent you, not the Prime Minister.
If you can, we'll go to Peter Carrick of the Communist Party of Canada.
It was criminal what happened to Jody Wilson-Raybould. The Attorney General was supposed to have independence. The decision-making of the Attorney General is supposed to be independent of political pressure. So to say that, well, we made a decision, I've been around the cabinet table and we make decisions, blah, blah, blah. Okay, you're not supposed to influence the Attorney General. They're supposed to be on top of the law, make their decisions without the influence of some corporation like SNC Lavalin, which is trying to get a get-out-of-jail-free card. That was the process that Jody Wilson-Raybould was opposed to. A deferred prosecution agreement is what Mr. Trudeau wanted to see happen, which means we know you're guilty of something, but we're just going to let you off because you donate a lot to our party.
That's exactly what it means.
Thank you, Peter. Okay, with that, we'll go to Terry Lake is throwing his challenge card here, so Terry Lake.
Thank you, and I just want everyone to understand what a deferred prosecution agreement is. It is to enable a company accused of wrongdoing to rectify the situation, hold the people responsible for those decisions to account, and not penalize the employees, the investors, the pensioners that are attached to that company. And may I say that all parties unanimously agreed to this deferred prosecution agreement when it went through committee stage in Parliament. They did. Now, they voted against it when it came because it was part of another bill, but in the committee stage, everyone voted for it. Siemens, a German company, went through a similar process in the late 90s. They are working all around the world today because of a deferred prosecution agreement. It is a tool used in many countries around the world, and it does not victimize people who were not responsible for wrongdoing.
Kathy McLeod is putting down her challenge card, and then after that we'll go back to Peter Carrick. But right now, Kathy.
The deferred prosecution agreement was tucked into a multi-page budget, and at the committee stage, there was no process by the Justice Committee, which should have been having the process. It should have been hived off, but what we're saying is the decision around a deferred prosecution agreement is not for Justin Trudeau, it is not for Cabinet, it's not for Bill Marneau, it is for the Director of Public Prosecutions to make that decision, and that
is how we have to do it. Okay, so Peter Carrick, Communist Party of Canada.
So here's a big difference too, why our party would never support the deferred prosecution agreement, is because we're not in favor of supporting corporations that break the law. We're not funded by those people, and I have no problem calling them out on their illegality. The things that SNC-Lavalin was accused of were things they were already found guilty of in other jurisdictions. Canada was just finally catching up to it. And I guarantee that if SNC-Lavalin was not a major contributor to the Liberal Party, that there would be no discussion about a deferred prosecution agreement, and we'd probably still have Jody Wilson-Raybould as the Attorney General. There was no other reason to fire her.
She resigned.
Hold on, I got 10 seconds. There's one other big thing. That jobs thing is hogwash. And if you listen to people in the industry, they say, we would have got the jobs elsewhere anyway. Some other Canadian corporation would have been given the jobs, not SNC-Lavalin.
Okay, that was some bang for buck on that question. We'll go to this one, to the left side now.
In 2015, Canadians voted overwhelmingly for parties that were calling for electoral reform, and none more so than the Liberals, who called for the last unfair election. That was their slogan, that they made a tentpole part of their campaign in 2015. We all thought that 2015 would be the last time we would ever have to try and hold our nose to vote for one party over another that we liked a little bit less because of one party or another that we were terrified of that much more. And we then went through a long process, the Electoral Reform Commission committee, which went across Canada and talked to people and held town halls, and it seemed like it was really going somewhere. And then at the end of that process, with weeks left before the report came out, Justin Trudeau cut the legs out from under it and undermined the whole process and threw it out the window. And so what I have to wonder is, given that was what happened to a tentpole promise from the Liberals in 2015, how can we take seriously anything that you're saying, all of the nice words that you're saying about climate change that you're trying to make their tentpole promises this time around?
I presume that's for Terry.
Thanks for the question, Matt. Electoral reform is something that is very hard to get consensus on. Here in British Columbia, we had 2 referenda on...
3.
I can remember 2, maybe it was before I moved back.
The first one got 57% yes.
Okay, so we've had multiple referenda on electoral reform. We've never agreed on the form of electoral reform, what type of proportional representation. People don't understand what it is. You mentioned that the commission went around, did a lot of work, and at the end of the day, there was not a consensus on the type of electoral reform to take. And so with so many ambitious targets in the platform, the government moved on to First Nations reconciliation, climate change. An independent analysis of the promises made by the Trudeau Liberals in 2015 show that 92% have been met or have progress on them. That's a pretty good one.
Cynthia Egley's thrown down a challenge card to Cynthia Egley, NDP.
I actually looked into this because it's something I didn't really understand, and I was like, wait, you mean we don't actually have, we still have to go with the old way of voting? Anyways, I did look into it, and over 80%, there was a poll that was done where the federal government asked for people to vote on the process, and it was over 80% people voted and put in their yes or no. So we can't even get that many people to vote federally in an election. So you can't tell me that the answer wasn't yes, we should go with the new system. But I believe what happened is the government just said they didn't like the answer, so they're going back, they're going to stay with the system we have now.
Thank you, Cynthia. We're going to hold off for a moment. We're going to take our next commercial break, but when we come back, more questions from you.